Okay, so all I could say is I have to get up and dance after listening to that music because that, my friends, is Frank London, my guest for today. Let me tell you a little bit about Frank before I bring him on. I mean, besides the fact that we're friends and besides the fact that I have enormous respect for him as a musician, as an artist, as a true mensch, Frank London, trumpeter, composer, Frank London is a member of the Klezmatics, Hasidic New Wave. He's performed with John Zorn, LL Cool J, Mel Torme, Lester Bowers, Brass Fantasy, Lamont Medioni, and Gal Costa. He's featured on over 100 CDs. His own recordings include invocations, cantorial music. And after listening to that, then think about cantorial music. We'll be listening to a little bit of that later. His klezmer brass all-stars, the Brotherhood of Brass, Nigunim, the Zmiris Project, with klezmatics vocalist Lawrence Sklamberg, the Det, the Shekhinah Big Band, the Schwitz, the soundtrack to Pearl Gluck's The Divan, and 4 releases with Hasidic New Wave. But that's nothing. That's only the tip of the iceberg. His projects include A Night in the Old Marketplace, which we'll be listening to a little later, that's based on Yud Lamed Peretz's Bei Nacht auf den Alten Mark, one of the great Yiddish literary pieces. Davenin, for Pilobolus and the Klezmatics. Great small works, the memoirs of Glickel of Hamlin. Romance, John Sayles, the brother from another planet. Men with Guns, Murder and Murder. Golem, the Ivy Project, live in Krakow, Poland in 2001. But wait, there's more. He was the music director for one of the greatest rock and roll musicians in the world, David Byrne. Talking Heads, Robert Wilson's The Knee Plays, and he collaborated with the Palestinian violinist Simon Shahid. He taught Jewish music in Canada, Crimea, and the Catskills. And he produced CDs for gypsy legend Esma Redzepova and Algerian pianist Maurice El Medioni. He's been featured on HBO's Sex and the City, and the North Sea Jazz Festival, the Lincoln Center Summer Festival, and he was a co-founder of Les Miserables Brass Band and the Klezmer Conservatory Band. Ladies and gentlemen, I could not be more proud to invite to join me here and schmooze my dear friend, Frank London. Frankie.
That's my cue to turn on.
That's your cue. Listen, the show's almost over now that I read your bio.
And I'll tell you this, but that bio, that's like the 10-year-old version, so it doesn't include any of my stuff from the last 10 years.
Well, but that's why we are now going to schmooze, because now I want you to tell us about the last 10 years. So I'm here live at the Betsy Hotel in the gallery, surrounded by the art of Carlos Betancourt. And the last time you and I were at the Betsy, Frank, was when we did our festival.
I know.
Before COVID, you were the big name act of our first Why I Love Yiddish Fest. So Frank, thank you.
Hashem will be back there live at the Betsy and hanging out, soon. But, you have done great stuff in the interim in this crazy last year. And I was lucky to be included in one of your what are we going to do during a pandemic programs.
And even before, are you kidding? Yeah. Not only were you here at our first, you were also at our second in New York in December.
Yeah, and then the pandemic version.
And then the pandemic versions. So how are you, Frank?
I'm talking to you. Life could be a lot worse.
That's right.
It's actually fine. I mean, you live in the land of beautiful weather and great beaches, but for us, when springtime finally comes and we have sunny days, it's just a miracle. So we're all just and people walk around wearing nothing but t-shirts, and people are smiling, and it's thank God, it's great.
Thank God. So Frank, when I hear the name Frank London, I don't immediately think, oh, a nice Jewish boy. So, for those who don't know you, can you give us like the quick Cliff Notes version of how your family, when did they come? How did you become a London?
Oh, well, I want to bring in your producer and friend and mine, Amy London, to join in this discussion. We can have the London talk. And because the sad fact is when Amy and I,
And
there
there
she
she
is.
is now,
Here I am. What a surprise.
Amy
I'll call you
London.
I'll call you my fake cousin. The sad fact is, of the four kind of, grandparents, I actually know the least about the Londons. My grandfather died well before I was born, and we came from one of those families that doesn't talk about stuff.
Right.
It doesn't. So I do have one artifact. So I don't, and he only had, my father passed away when I was fairly young, so I never got to ask him all these questions. So and I never knew when I would ask, where's our family from? I got that brilliant answer, Poland, Russia, over there. Great, really helpful for those who care about this. And and I know he only had one sister, so I don't think and the only other London I knew who was my great uncle Lou London, who my son is named after, my son Lou London. He never got married, so I don't know any other Londons I'm related to outside of my wife and kids. And my
Any
wife is
idea?
in London.
Any idea what the name was before London?
You know, I could tell you the acceptable stories, but they're not even family stories. The three stories about London, and I'm curious, Amy, what you know. The three stories are: it's a misspelling of Lambden for scholar. That's one story of the Jewish name
London.
London.
Wow.
Or the other one, which doesn't quite make sense because it's not like my family came from England, is that hundreds of years ago, when there was an expulsion, the Jews from London moved east, and that was before people had last names. And then when they got last names, they were called, "Oh, you're the Jew from London," so
Right.
it's either London or Londoner. So
Right. Londoner.
that's the other story I've heard, but that's not like telling me anything particular about my family. I mean, do you know anything else about
I
the
don't know
name?
very much. I was told it was an Ellis Island name.
Right.
Oh, okay.
That's the story in my family. Whether or not we never know if that's true. I know that
So,
my family was from Minsk in Russia.
well, yeah.
Right.
So
And
you don't
that's
know
all I got.
what the name was before they made it London.
No idea.
But I think that in our family it was London before Ellis Island, because I did see some certificate once that my great grand was it my great grandfather or my grandfather who I never met, Steve London, like some sort of certificate. I think it might have been this might have been our family name. But
I love the idea
because
that
I
it
mean,
came from
I mean,
London
yeah,
because London is an educated person.
there you,
And I could easily see that somebody hears London and says London.
yeah.
And there you go. Ellis Island
But
story.
I hate it because I would love to be able to play the game where Amy and I figure out that we have a cousin in common.
Connected.
But I don't know.
Do you have any relatives in Cleveland?
I have relatives, but none named London. No, I have no relatives named London. As I said, my father died, other than my brother and my kids.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, no,
Have you ever
nobody.
gone to Ellis Island to the museum to
No,
look
I
for the
haven't done
records?
that chasing it around. So
I'd be curious to know if there's a
yeah.
ship registry with your great grandfather or whatever grandfather who came over with the name London. But let me ask you, Frank. So again, when I hear Frank London, it's not the first thing that occurs to me is not, oh, nice Jewish boy who does great, amazing Jewish klezmer music with an amazing contemporary twist. When in your life story were you introduced to the Jewish? Were you always very Jewish? Were you always slightly Jewish? Were you always a little bit too Jewish? Were you too Jewish?
Oh,
When did klezmer become a part of your life?
okay.
I'm going to take off.
Okay.
Bye. because
Yeah.
um, well, it's funny, okay, and I have a real kind of opinionated pain in the ass answer to this because I've always been Jewish, nothing but Jewish, 100% Jewish, lived a total Jewish life, identified as Jewish. I didn't know the word halacha until I was in my 20s. We didn't, we were Reformed Jews. You see, part of my family goes back about 4 or 5 generations in America
Wow.
and came from Reformed Jews probably in Germany or somewhere near then. And so we're 100% Reformed Jews, which means, we don't keep kosher. We didn't even have the word kosher.
Right.
You eat anything. My grandfather had a delicatessen. He made salami and cheese sandwiches. It's like whatever. But we're
Absolutely.
Jews. So it's like Judaism is not owned to say, are you a religious Jew? Yes, I'm a religious reform, or I was a religious reformed Jew. We followed we drove to temple, not to synagogue. We drove to temple on Friday night, and we weren't like those hypocritical conservative Jews who drove a block away from the
And
temple
then
and
walk.
walked the 1 block. We were really authentic Jews who drove to temple.
Right.
So I got a real rap about that because people think that being Jewish, is only authentic if you're wearing a beard and a shtreimel. And then for the second half of the question, the Yiddish and the klezmer, I'm an American Jew. I'm envious of you, Avi, because of your yichus, because of your mother, because of your linguistic skills, because of your knowledge of all these things. And it's wonderful. And I'm so blessed that I met people like you and Eleanor as an adult and could understand it. But I have to say, my grandparents probably spoke Yiddish. I never heard them speak Yiddish.
Right.
I'm sure they understood it, but I never heard a word of Yiddish growing up. I never heard a note of. I've figured out in hindsight that there were three three signifiers of Yiddishkeit in my entire childhood. Three, for no reason. You remember, for you old folks out there, for you young people, do you remember 45 RPM records, singles, right?
Sure.
And we had our singles, and I had the Beatles, and I had Herman's Hermits, and I had, all the hit songs in Motown, which had the kind of blue with the orange and yellow label, and had all that stuff. And I remember that in my box of singles, someone, I don't know who, my brother, my sister, who are older, my parents, there was one Mickey Cat single, which wasn't in Yiddish, but it was one of those English parodies, and it
Right.
was take a choo-choo train to Casablanca. There you'll find a continental Yankee. I had no idea what this was, but that was one. Two was a copy of the Leo Roston book, The Education of Hyman Kaplan,
Kaplan. Sure.
which I read, when I was like probably 9, and it was so interesting. But I didn't think of that as being my family or my relatives. It was just a book that was
Right.
on our bookshelf.
Right.
And the third one is when we would go to my grandparents' house, who had the deli in Brooklyn Heights and everything. They had an LP, a double LP of the comedy record "You Don't Have to Be Jewish,"
Right.
and I
Sure.
knew every one of those jokes. Do you know all those jokes?
Sure.
You,
Of
you
course.
remember?
Every
You know,
single one, just about.
you know, to a captain, you're no captain. I can tell you the punchlines.
Yeah.
I'm hiding.
Right.
I'm hiding. Remember, I'm hiding in the front closet.
Yeah. When
You
you're
know,
in love, the whole world is Jewish. There was a
that,
whole
that
series.
was that
Frank
was the
Foster.
sequel. That was the sequel to it. That was the
Right.
second one.
Yeah.
Um, so other than that, I had no connection to Yiddishkeit.
Wow.
But you can tell even when I do that, the punchlines, that you heard it. It was in my ear from even from that.
Right.
And then when
I
I was in
mean,
my
you're
20s,
not alone, Frank. 85% of the Jewish people are not really connected to that background. I'll take it even one step further. I may be very knowledgeable or connected to my Yiddishkeit, but when I was growing up, I was an atheist. We weren't even reform. We didn't drive
yeah,
to any place.
but you were a Yiddish speaking atheist.
Yes, we were Yiddishists.
Okay, here's where you and I totally are from different sides of the coin. Do you remember the band The Fugs and
Yes,
Tootie Kupferberg,
yeah,
right? So do
right.
you remember on their first album they had a song called Nothing?
I
And it
do.
went like this: Monday nothing, Tuesday
Tuesday. I do remember
nothing.
that. Bulbous,
So when you heard that, you cracked up and you said, "Oh my God, there's
right?
making fun of Bulbous and Thule Kupferberg, who's Naftuli Kupferberg, is an old Yid and he gets it." When I heard that, it was just part of my punk growing up. And years later, when I heard the song Bulbous, when I learned this, I said, "Wow, someone took that Fugs tune and put it into Yiddish."
It's so
I
funny.
didn't know. I didn't
So
know.
when did you discover this stuff?
Okay, I'm 19 years old. I'm 20 years old. I go to New England Conservatory of Music, having grown up with nothing but rock and roll and soul music and basic American
Right,
alternative hippie radio music. And at that period, I just was introduced to every other kind of music in the world. And I just mean that absolutely.
right.
In school and out of school, I started playing in salsa bands, merengue bands, Haitian bands. I studied jazz. I started playing classical music. I, Balkan music, experiment, everything
Frank, when did you start playing trumpet?
when I was 9, public
Okay.
school education.
Wow.
Yeah. Um,
Wow.
and I was there was a teacher at New England Conservatory who I actually knew as a kid named Hank Snetsky, and
Sure.
he was putting together a band to play this music of his family, and it was this music called klezmer music, and I was part of this concert we gave, and it was like 1979 or 1980, and that concert became the Klezmer Conservatory Band, and I played with them, and then I moved to New York about 6 years later, and we formed the Klezmatics. And then I just started getting more and more and more into it. That's it.
Right.
Nothing else.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's so, so amazing. I'm sure most of the people who were in that first band, probably almost every one of them has become an icon in the klezmer world. I'm guessing.
No, half and half.
Oh,
It really split down the middle because about half of them aren't even still professional musicians.
okay.
So you got the people who went on and did, like one of them, Abby Rabinovitz, is a real estate agent. Um, uh, what's his name? Marvin is a lawyer. Charlie Berg is a computer designer. So there's the half that went on and became,
Wow. Wow.
and then the other half include people like Don Byron, who you know very well from the Mickey Cat stuff,
Yeah.
Alan Byrne, who went on to found Yiddish Summer Weimar. So you
Right.
have half of the people who became really the amazing icons in that Yiddish klezmer world, and the other half who just went into other fields.
Right. Can you tell us just a little bit about that first tune that we heard? The
Okay,
Astro-Hungarian tune?
Astro-Hungarian. I love that I still get people telling me, "Listen, you misspelled this. You misspelled it. It's Austro-Hungarian." And I look at them like, "Oh, you
Like,
have
don't you
no,
see the space helmets?
yeah, you have no sense of creativity or imagination or humor, do you?"
Right.
Okay, or you don't know who Sun Ra is. Um, that was part of the project that basically led to me being knighted Sir Frank London. I am Sir
Yes.
Frank
I'm
London.
sorry. I forgot to refer to
There
you
you go.
as Sir
Well,
Frank.
that's okay. Just as we like to say, you can call me anything you want. Just don't call me late for dinner, right?
Right. Right.
You know.
So why did you get knighted?
Well, it's all part of that. I got invited by the Hungarian culture. Okay, backstory. I've done lots of work over the years in Hungary, in Hungary with Hungarian musicians, with my own bands. One of the deepest stories of my entire life is the first time right after the Iron Wall comes down. It's 1992. The Iron Wall curtain comes down. Plasmatics get invited. We play our first concert in Budapest. Thousands of people going nuts, and I'm walking in the crowd and talking to people, and this guy comes over to me, and he's like my age, which back then meant late 20s, early 30s, and he's crying, and he says, "This," he says literally, "this is the first time in my life I ever knew that being a Jew was simply something you could feel good about." And I was like, what did I do to deserve this? You know, just by us sharing the music, because he grew up. First you have the Holocaust, then you have communism,
Right.
and then you just have local anti-Semitism anyway. And between all of this, you're a victim, you're an enemy of the people, you're this, you're that. Or you're, someone who's been, you're anything, it's anything except just something as simple as, oh yeah, Judaism, that's really cool. I'm really glad I'm Jewish, you
Right.
know, let alone make, funny shows like Two Jew, all those things. So I've been going to Hungary for many years, doing a lot of stuff. I got approached by the Hungarian Cultural Consulate here in New York because, as you know, as I learned, the Jews who were killed in the Holocaust in Hungary were all killed in essentially in 1944.
Yeah.
We're doing okay.
My entire family, Frank.
Okay, so you knew this.
We're all Hungarian. My
Oh,
father was
okay. So
Hungarian.
so I'll tell you the whole story because as with so many things, it's a learning thing for me. So they came. So I didn't even know this, and so we're getting up to 2014. It must have been. So they're saying we want to do a 70th anniversary commemoration of when all the Hungarian Jews were deported and killed, which all happened in 1944.
Right.
And we talked about it, and there was a wonderful, brilliant, not Jewish, Hungarian cultural activist. I mean, look, Hungary's government has gone so crazy right wing that this guy lost his job. Everyone I worked with lost their jobs, and it's totally a different world. But at that time, he was still fighting the good fight for multiculturality and an open Hungary. So his name is Gergi Romshis, and he said, we want to do something to commemorate this, to commemorate the lives, but we don't want it to just be your typical, oh, Holocaust, the poor dead Jews and everything. We want to, we want to, we want to celebrate the time when Jews lived in Hungary as part of a living culture,
Right.
as part of the community and what they did to enrich Hungary. And we want to look at that and celebrate that and not only look at the fact that they were killed and there's no Jews left.
Right.
And I agreed with him. And after talking, we decided to take it even a step further and to look at other groups when Hungary was a real look, it's still a multicultural country, but now they try to act like it's all one people and have these racist government.
Right.
But there was a time when Hungary celebrated being and especially when it was part of the Austro-Hungarian Empire,
Right.
and so you had Czechs, Slovaks,
Right.
Jews, Christians, Eastern Orthodox people,
Right.
Roma, Gypsy, Muslim, Carpathian,
Serbians, Bosnians. Oh
all these
God, yes.
people, and all their cultures were living in Hungary. So I did tons of research into all different strains. I mean, did you know? You knew because you know this stuff. I didn't know some of the music in some of the Hungarian Jewish music was actually Sephardic. It
Yes.
wasn't only Ashkenazic. Who knew? So I did all this research and I put this band together of Hungarians and New Yorkers and some klezmer experts, but other just creative musicians, including one of the best Hungarian cymbal players, cymbalum. uh, Miki. I'll tell you more about him later. And uh, and we created a program which looked at all these different musics. So the piece you heard, and it was the Austro-Hungarian suite, the glass. Oh, the name Glass House Orchestra. Why? Why the Glass House? Because I had to find a name for it, right? And I did research, and it turned out there was one diplomat. Like every country has someone who saves Jewish lives. And there was one guy, and and it was the Swiss government, and it was the Swiss embassy.
Hmm.
And this doesn't speak for the whole Swiss government in Switzerland, because we know
Right.
all the problems with that. But this guy used the government building, the embassy building, to hide Jews and get them forged or certain kind of visas so they get out. So he saved a few hundred Jews. And the building that housed the Swiss embassy was called the Glass House Building. And I just read that and I said, okay, this is the right message. And there was something about the name, the Glass House, people who live in glass houses shouldn't
Right.
throw stones in it. And I said, this is a beautiful name, and it gives me a story to tell when I talk about it. And it reflects, so it gives us the history.
But how did you get knighted?
Okay. Oh, so after all this, and we did this, and we made the recording, and the song you heard is something. I just got to finish that, and then I'll tell the nighting. Um, so I have one of my oldest best friends, Bob Cohen, who's the person who taught me about Rastafarianism and Nyabingi music, but that's another story. Whose mother was Hungarian and who moved back. He made Aliyah to Budapest about 25 years ago,
Okay.
and he's been living in Budapest, being the hippie klezmer musician in Budapest. But he's close with all the Roma gypsy musicians, and he goes into the Carpathians. And what happened as the Jews were killed, the only people who remembered the traditional Jewish music were the gypsy musicians in those towns.
Right.
And so this tune was recorded by a band called the Tetra Band, and they are Roma gypsy musicians who play, and this is a Jewish style tune that they learned years ago. The old violinists learned it from playing for the Jewish weddings. So they think of this as a Jewish wedding tune. And we just heard it, we just made our Astro version by playing it, like alternating between a traditional Hungarian Jewish band and then the freaky improvisation band.
Right.
So
Right.
that's how we made that
I love
arrangement.
that. So
So,
how did you get
so
knighted?
okay. So we do all this, and we made the album, did a bunch of concerts, spread the good word, the gospel of multicultural Hungary.
Right.
So then the same guy, Gergi Romchis, who still was the cultural attaché, he had not been taken away from his job, calls me one day and he goes, "Listen, if we offer you a night shift, will you accept?" And I said, what the fuck are you talking about? And he says, and then I realized, uh, because by now the government is getting more and more right wing, and Hungary's got a bad name. Um, so um, they don't want bad PR. So they don't want to say they offered night shift and people turned them down. That's bad optics. So I said, I didn't know what to say. It's like, sure, I want to be Sir Frank London. That's fun. Who the fuck gets to be Sir anything, Except Sir, like Bugs Bunny used to say, sirloin of beef, you
Yeah.
know. um, so I said, Gergi, you're a smart man. You know the world better than I do. What should I say? I'll just follow your lead. So he said, I want you to do this, and we will make a speech at the ceremony about multiculturalism and my work celebrating this time when Hungary was a multicultural place with Jews and Gypsies and Carpathians and different,
Right.
and and that I'm getting knighted for this work. And I said, okay, so we'll make a statement out of it. So I did it, got knighted. I found out the fact that if if the country that knights you has a monarch, Then they do the thing with the sword where you bend down and they do the sword.
Right.
But if they don't have a monarch and Hungary doesn't have a monarchy anymore, they just shake your hand and give you
Give you a
the
certificate.
and a badge and medal and all that. Yeah,
Oh,
I
nice.
didn't get the sword thing.
Nice.
Um, and then
Wow.
just to finish the story,
Go
uh,
ahead.
okay, just to finish the story, and then we'll move on. Then things took a turn yet again for the worse, and the right wing government gave the same knighthood that I had, the same order of merit, to a fucking right wing anti Semitic scumbag. And so I essentially abdicated my knighthood. I wrote a letter to the president saying, "You have besmirched the good name of the Order of Merit that I received by giving this guy, and I rescind my knighthood." Um,
Wow.
but since we're Americans and we don't give a shit about any of this stuff, I call myself Sir Frank London. I don't know. Was I officially ex-knighted? I have no idea. I
I
don't.
think it's a brilliant story and will be amazing in your biography. So
Great.
I want to play another song before we move on, all right?
Right.
And you could tell us about this on the other side.
Okay.
In a tavern up in Pinsk, all the corpses have a drink. Oh, beware the evil eye. With a nod, they down their cups, drowning sorrows in their schnapps, just like you or I. Rather than in lonely graves, they wait there for deliverance. Can you fault such common sense? In a tavern up in Pinsk, all the corpses have a drink. Oh, perhaps today they're buying. The Talmud doesn't give a clue if they're allowed to have a few, but knew it takes the sting off dying. Alive or dead, it's all the same, so pass another glass to pass the time till the Savior comes, till the Mashiach comes at last.
Wow. Wow. Frank, where'd you go?
Okay.
A
So yeah.
tavern in Pinsk.
First of all, I'm so glad to be talking to you of all people about this, Avi, because not everyone knows Yud Lamed Peretz and by Nachtaf and Mark.
Yeah, that's right.
That's and which is
But Frank, that's why your work is so important from my perspective.
thank you.
Because I know it, and the people that know it know they know it. But more and more and more people have no idea that this even exists. So your work is so important to be able to bring it back to the world and in a way that is contemporary. And that's what I want you to really talk to us about is how do you take this Yiddishkeit, this old world Yiddishkeit, and bring it into the new world in such a creative way?
Well, out of necessity. Um, uh, Out of necessity, another thing. I'll answer short because I want to ask you some questions about this.
Okay.
So, okay, so what do I do? I've been blessed that I've been more or less able to follow my own artistic impulse. How the hell I've been able to do that, but I have, and I have no idea how it worked, but it did. So, so I have no desire to just repeat. I have no need to just repeat the way things were done. They were already done that way. There's no need for that.
Right.
So I want to do things my way. So that, and as we like to say, the rest is commentary, and the commentary is the works that I do.
Right.
But here's a particular question, and I want to get you involved in this. So let's use by Nachthoff and Altenmark as an example. One of the greatest works of Yiddish theater. It's interesting. You called it a literary work, not a theatrical work, and that is very telling because it's no. It's almost more known as a literary masterpiece because even though it is one of the most famous works in Yiddish theater history, it has been staged less than 10 times in the last 100 years
Right.
because it is essentially an unstageable work of theater. It, because it has over 100 characters,
Right.
most of whom come on and say one line. Yeah, you know, what a theater is going to hire 100 actors at union scale to come on and say, "Hello, I am the carpenter. I fix the houses and build the coffins," and then walk off. You know,
Right.
"Oh, I'll see you tomorrow." But so it's unstageable. He pre pre what is it called where you do something first before someone else? Presaged, pre
Proceed.
preceded. Thank you. Uh, Pirandello in breaking the fourth wall, you know, and it opens with a scene, the backstage at the theater with the producers and the playwright having an argument about, you know, this isn't going to sell. You have to do it this way, and you can't talk about this stuff. You know, that's not what's commercial. And and into this, a guy walks on this thing into the room of this meeting and falls asleep, and he's on stage the whole show, and the idea is that perhaps this entire show is this guy's dream.
Right.
It's a crazy show, but we love it. It's a genius. Long story short, when trying to figure out how to adapt it with Alex Aaron, who's the director, and Glenn Berger, who's the writer, the question is, we wanted it to be in Yiddish. We tried to do it in Yiddish. And we just realized, and this has happened to me time and time and time again, and it's happening even now with a new show I'm working on, where basically at the end of the day they say you can't do it in Yiddish, no one's going to understand it. And if you have super titles, everyone's reading the super titles, and just do it in English, that's what people want. And how do we break? And so we did a great job. Glenn Berger wrote these new songs. I love that it's all in English. It's fantastic.
Right.
But yet again, I didn't do a piece of Yiddish theater. Yet again, it turned into a piece of Yiddishkeit that is in English.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I believe me, I know exactly what you
I
mean.
know you do. This is what I meant. So talked about it. Schmooze with me about trying to do things in Yiddish when people don't understand Yiddish.
Well, you know, I think there are a few ways to look at this. Number one, there was a time for a very long time, and I'm going back now to the late 50s, early 60s, late 60s,
Hold on, I
and
know
then
where
the
you're going.
70s and the
It
80s.
goes into 19. I'll tell you why I say this in a minute, because I want to hear the rest of your story. But it goes until the mid 1980s, and
Right.
and I'll tell you why. But go on.
Well, but no, you're right, because in the mid 1980s, people realized, wait a minute, maybe there's a way to do Yiddish that will appeal to people and they'll start coming back again. So, you know, I was in the theater. I wasn't in your world, in the klezmer world. I was in the Yiddish theater world. So the Golden Land came along, which was the big revolution. And it was Zalman and Moshe and Eleanor and me and Bruce Adler eventually and Phyllis Burke and Joanne Bortz and Neva Small. And, you know, there were all these younger people who suddenly realized, damn, this is good stuff. And that became a revolution. And it
Golden Land
opened up
Songs
the
of
door
Paradise.
a little bit.
Yeah, Songs of Paradise.
Right. And then came Songs of Paradise. And
Very,
Songs of Paradise was the second revolution.
very
That was
important.
1989, where we took Yiddish, we added abyssal English, just enough English that we didn't need to do subtitles. We didn't have subtitles. Golden Land had subtitles. You know, Songs of Paradise didn't have subtitles. And so we were doing Yiddish, but the stories were familiar. Adam and Eve, Abraham and Sarah, Joseph, Jacob, the Bible. People kind of understood the stories, and we added enough English so that people could understand everything. And Joe Papp at the Public Theater said, wow, I love this. Come on over. And suddenly we became one of the longest running shows in the history of the Public Theater. So I guess my point is that starting then, more and more people realized that Yiddish could be financially feasible. And so now you get Death of a Salesman and Fiddler on the Roof and Waiting for Godot in Yiddish. And they were successful. But I don't know why the producers are still very reticent to produce a Yiddish show. So I don't know what the answer is, except one of these days I'll have the money to be able to produce Yiddish shows, and then we're going to produce Yiddish shows,
So
Frank.
also, by the way, I know this is changing the subject, but this is one of the reasons I did the opera that we will do in Miami with you together, the
Yes,
opera Hotway Memory of Fire, because I wanted to prove a point. And the point I wanted to prove is that opera, no one expects it to be in English. No one even expects, even if it is in English, to understand the words. You go there, you read the synopsis, and you follow the super titles. So in opera, you can get away with it. And that's
right,
why that was the first one that I actually did in Yiddish, and I didn't compromise and move it into English.
right.
You know,
Yeah,
because opera, and the funny thing is, and this was another part of my thinking, opera singers are trained to sing in any language that they don't know. It's a system, it's an art, it's a
right.
skill. And I said, why not Yiddish? And of the 15 singers, the opera singers in Hathaway in the cast, one of them had done any work in Yiddish or before then. And I think there were zero Jews in the entire cast.
Right. Yeah.
That, and it's like, you know what the biggest problem was with getting them to learn the Yiddish? The biggest problem was with the classical singers, the African American and Latino classical singers who had been trained to sing German lieder, to tell them that Yiddish is not German.
Right.
That was the problem, to get them to say ich and not ish.
Ish.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I
That's right.
was like, no, no, it's Yiddish. So that was really the biggest problem, was getting them not to pronounce it like it was in German.
Listen, when Michael Tilson Thomas did
Yeah,
the Tomaszewski show,
yep, yep,
other than one person, the beautiful Judy Blazer, everybody else was opera singers.
of course.
And they learned
They just
the
learn it.
way they could.
They did.
And it sounded great and it was beautiful.
Yep.
Yeah, I would love. Do you want to tell the audience a little bit about Hathaway?
I don't know. What's the next thing we're going to play?
The next thing we're going to play is What You Did for Me. What you,
Okay, so
Eleanor,
you know what?
did, no turning
Look,
back.
time is going to fly. We can always have part two.
All right.
Yeah, and
Fair enough.
I'll give you another teaser of something to talk about. So I'm working on a show now. And this is what just connected to our last subject. There was, through the mid 1980s, an annual revival of Yiddish theater at Town Hall in New York,
Yes.
produced by David Carey, Henry's
Right.
brother, and by what's his name, who is Mary Soriano's husband,
Raymond Ariel.
Raymond Ariel. And to make a long story short, I'm working on a crazy play of our own invention that starts with a real life revival of the comedianka,
Right.
the showgirl, which was a play by Nellie Kasman, who
Right.
wrote Yussel Yussel
Yep.
from 1920 something. They did a revival of that with Mary Soriano in 1984. But this show we're writing, which is called Desperately Seeking Nellie, is about, if you picture Times Square in the 80s with the transvestites and
Right.
the sex shows and the drugs on the street,
Oh,
and
I
the
love
fact that here we are, because Town Hall is on like 43rd Street. It's like right outside, it's right
Yeah.
in Times Square. And you have a Yiddish theater revival of this show in Times Square
I
in the
love it.
1980s. And so we're creating this crazy thing. Unfortunately, it's going to be mostly in English for all the reasons we talk about. I'm arguing with the writer right now because I want more Yiddish. I kill myself. But it's about, it's the classic story of a cantor's daughter, a from cantor's daughter who wants to either sing cantorial music or be in theater. Her mother wanted to be in theater, but she was from and she couldn't. So she runs away from home to audition in the 1980s in Times Square to audition for the showgirl, and she runs into her neighbor who she grew up with, who's an ex-Hasid now, who's come out as a transvestite, who's a gay drag performer, and it's just like the classic thing, and it deals with Times Square and the AIDS activism, but also with the fact that Yiddish was alive in the 1980s, which is so crazy.
And this is why, again, I appreciate you so much because your creativity is beyond bounds. I'm not surprised you won a Grammy Award, and you can tell us about that later. But the idea that you can take anything and turn it into something so totally new and exciting. Before we play this next cut, I want you to tell our audience about how you and Eleanor and the musicians that you chose, when I called you and said, we're doing a COVID festival and I want you to be a part of it. I don't care what you do whatever you want. And you said, well, I don't know. What are we going to do? I said, well, part of what we're doing is a commemoration of the liberation of the concentration camps. And you looked at me and you said, that's it, I got it. And then you went and created something called No Turning Back, you and Eleanor. Tell us a little bit about it, and then I want to play what we are now promoting to the world, what I think needs to be on Netflix or on HBO, which is your amazing concert with Eleanor of No Turning Back. So how did that come into being?
Okay, I found what I was looking for. A little prop. Props are always good, right? Props are good. And did you mention in that leading up to it that this is all in the midst of the pandemic when no one can do anything?
In the heart of COVID, I
Yeah.
turned to Frank and Eleanor
Okay.
and
So
said,
first of all, I
please,
want to show you one of the most important of many books in my collection, in my resources. Can you all see this?
Lieder von die Ghettos und Lagern. Wow. Songs from the ghettos and the camps.
Yeah,
Right.
exactly. By Shmerka Kaczerginski.
Yes.
And this is one of the saddest, most, I don't know, ironic, I don't know, I don't even know the word, tragic stories. Kaczerginski survived
Right.
the war,
Yes.
survived the Holocaust. He made his way to Latin America. He survived. He got out, died in a plane crash 3 years later. He's like, and that's what, when your time's up, your time's up. There's nothing you can say, you know. But what he did is in this book, he collected, and look how big this book is.
Yeah.
He collected all the songs that were sung in the ghettos and in the camps. So Eleanor Risa, I don't have to say anything about Eleanor. You know her, you've probably schmoozed with her online. Everyone knows
We
her.
did. We
All I'm saying is
celebrated
she's
her for Yom HaShoah.
Yeah, so she's got so much information and knowledge, it's ridiculous.
Right.
So we were like, and she's game to do anything. So we were like, let's do the songs of resistance, the songs that mean things. And we even picked up songs that are so overdone that no one does them anymore. I love that. Like we did Vihin Zolach Gain. I mean, no one sings that because everyone used to sing it all the time,
Right.
And Eleanor would never do, and we looked at it and said, yeah, but let's present them with this focus on your commemoration, with the focus on the depth of it, but let's do it with our own musical twist. And I'll just say one more thing and then let's play the clip. I went into the garden right 2 doors from my apartment. It was a beautiful sunny summer day. We set up in the garden. We were separate from each other, beautiful wind blowing.
Oh,
And we filmed this concert.
ladies and gentlemen, watch this.
Oh, Jesus.
Es brennt, widerlich, es brennt. Unser Ohren steht uneblich brennt. Weise Winden mit gegossen, reichen brechen uns zu bloßen. Starke noch wie wilde Flammen, als im Schein brennt. In ihr steht den Kopf, da so sich mit verlegter Hand. Und ihr steht den Kopf, da so sich wie unser Städtel brennt.
So this is why I talk about how I'm busier than fuck. Oh, I gotta go back.
So turn on your video again, please, because I stopped your video.
Oh, it says unable to start video.
Oh, hold on. All right. Give me a.
Yeah, I'm not allowed. They're not
All
allowed.
right, here. Start your video.
Okay.
So listen, that entire concert was truly one of the most extraordinary expressions. And what I found most amazing about it was the positivity of it, the life that was in it. You know, when Deep Singh starts going into those bongos and the guys behind you were playing these unbelievable grooves, you know, suddenly it took it away from being a depressing song about the Holocaust. Oy, es brennt, Brüderlach. Suddenly it became a song about life. Even though our town is burning, we are fighting for life. We are living. Tell me about that concert. Tell me a little bit about how in COVID you were able to rehearse and record such a brilliant piece of art and music.
I don't even remember how we rehearsed it. Oh my God. I swear. I don't know. I mean, I told you how we recorded it. We got together outside,
Right.
set up the film, and, stayed away from each other. And me and Eleanor were in front because we had masks off, you know. And I forget how we
And I
did
think
it.
you guys
But
had like one rehearsal.
yeah, probably we had one rehearsal, and I
Oh,
taught him, basically, look, this is what I do. This is what we do. But let's just talk about something maybe more important, which is especially what you were saying about like S. Brent, for example. And it's not only, as you said, like a celebration of the life that we survived, but there's the anger and the urgency, and it's like it's not just being defeated, but it's a protest against others.
right.
And the thing is, and this is really the thing, people who totally understand the language, who it's not just something that, look, the opera singers, they learn how to sort of deal with it as music. But when someone like yourself or Eleanor, this is what I'm saying, who for whom the language is just your language, you can put, hold on, don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. You can just express what you need to express in the language. So when Eleanor and I spoke about exactly what you're asking, how do we do these songs without it just being a maudlin sort of, bemoaning, but have a living vitality because, we are here, wir seien da,
Wir
you
seien
know,
da.
and no turning back is sort of, in a weird way, it's sort of a takeoff on that but mixed as usual with a reference to like Bob Dylan in the 1960s. But um, but we talk about these things, and Eleanor, like yourself again, this is why you two are such a peas in a pod, because you're more than just singers, actors, thinkers, doers. So it's like we can talk about, like when you and I did the crazy stupid fun bagels and bongos stuff, which
Right.
we will do again. We
Yes.
will do. That's such a Miami show.
Yes,
We can
absolutely.
almost do it in the hotel where you are. I mean,
Yep.
or out on Calle Ocho, one of those
Right.
Calle Ocho festivals. We come in with bagels and bongos.
Yep.
That would be amazing.
I'm
But my point
already
is
I'm
this.
already there.
Yeah, but my point is this: we can talk about what is the intention of this project? What is our attitude in this project? How do we want to interpret these songs? They are texts that call out for interpretation. And the fact that you and Eleanor are so intimately aware of these texts, then you can approach them from so many angles. You could do the same set list. You could make it nostalgic. You
Right.
could make it uh, you could take it any way.
Make it
And with the
punky.
musician, with the instrumentalist, I just approach it just on strictly musical terms.
Right.
Here's what I need, here's the feel. But with the singer, the one who's putting across the message, then we talk about what are we trying to do here.
Right.
You know what I mean? So if we did, just as an example, if we were going to be on out in Miami Beach at a salsa festival representing Yiddish music and doing like my crazy bagels and bongos stuff,
Right.
and and you were singing my Yiddish mama, I would say to you, Avi,
Right.
this is not a sentimental my Yiddish mama. This
Right.
is a sexy my, and you would know what to do about it.
Right.
You know what I mean? And
You know,
that's and that's
I've done a version of Yiddish Mama as a tango.
of
There is
course,
an
of
old
course you
tango
have,
version of my
of
Yiddish Mama.
course you have.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think at the end of the day, you are so generous in talking about my creativity, and I thank you. But it's really it's a group effort. If not for other people and their amazing talent, maybe my talent is in knowing the other people who have the talent that I can work with.
Right. Oh,
Maybe that's my
absolutely.
real
It's
talent,
such a collaborative effort. There's no
you
question.
know.
Look, you won a
Exactly.
Grammy Award. I don't want to get into a whole discussion about it. But do you want to tell us just a little bit about, what that was
Yeah,
like?
yeah, absolutely. The Klezmatics won a Grammy in 2006 for Best Contemporary World Music Album for our recording Wonder Wheel lyric with lyrics by Woody Guthrie, and it was all Woody Guthrie's words and our music. And I have to say again, with the great irony which just continually defines my life. Um, so the Klezmatics, the first Jewish music band to win a Grammy, as doing. I have to tell you that of all our albums that we've made, and we've made like 13 or 15 albums, I don't remember. This is the only one that has almost no Yiddish language or klezmer music on it,
Amazing.
because it's a klezmatics album, but it's not a klezmer. It's a klezmatics Woody Guthrie album.
Right.
It's like so funny, but I still feel I said it back. I think even when we accepted the Grammy, and in interviews at that time, that I really felt, because if you look at this klezmer Yiddish revival, we started talking about the mid '70s or early '80s as a date
Right.
when things started to revive again
Right.
and build up. And in the 25 years since then, no one had won a Grammy or probably a Tony for a Yiddish play or anything like that. In the and I felt like the Klezmatics were representing all of us in this community
Right.
that had been doing this collectively, and so it really
It's
felt
so interesting.
more special.
It's very interesting because that's kind of how the Yiddish literary world felt when Isaac Bashevis Singer won his Nobel Prize for
Exactly.
Literature.
Exactly. Exactly.
Was
And do you
suddenly
remember,
representative
obviously,
of the entire Yiddish literary world, won that Nobel Prize for literature.
100%. 100%. And now my memory is so bad, but when you and I worked together on the big show about Yiddish at Carnegie Hall, a mere 2 years ago, a
Right?
mere, a mere 2 years ago,
Wow.
um, I don't remember if it ended up in the final script or not, but the finale was all about Isaac Bashevis Singer's acceptance speech.
Right. That's right.
And
Yeah.
it just, and he spoke about this, and
Yeah.
and it's just so important.
I do that speech in my Two Jewish show.
As well you
Yeah.
should.
Yeah, because it
As-
is seminal.
yeah.
The acceptance speech of Isaac
Yep.
Bashevis Singer is seminal. So before we finish, because we're already past an hour, but I don't care. We can go as long as you want. Um, I want you to tell us about this new project, and then I'll play a cut from it. You
Thank
know,
you so much, by the way, for inviting me to schmooze. I just wish we had the coffee and the bagels and we were together. Or
soon enough, my friend,
if it
soon
was
enough.
later in the day, the margarita and
Yeah.
or the vodka and the herring. Um, okay, so yet
Sammy's
again,
Romanian is gone.
it is. Oh, did you ever
So
perform there?
I didn't perform there, but I did our opening night party for Songs of Paradise was at
Was
Sammy's
that
Romanian, and we waited up until the newspaper reviews came out, and at midnight, Joe Papp read the New York Times review where it said there is nothing now in New York that can even come close to this production. I mean, that was the New York Times in 1989, January 20th at midnight. Anyway, that was Sammy's Romanian, and the schmaltz flowed freely. So, what's the
it
new
did really
project?
good?
What's the new
Okay,
project?
so
Not today, we'll talk
is
about.
called new project is called Ghetto Songs, and yet again, it starts with me being given an opportunity to think about something and to come up with something. And in this case, in 2015, I was invited to Venice to hang out and to talk with Beit Venezia, which is an organization, a new Jewish organization based in the ghetto in Venice.
Which is the
Because
oldest Jewish ghetto.
let's go further than that. It's the first ghetto in the world to be called a ghetto.
That's right,
That's where the word ghetto comes from.
right?
The word ghetto, because ghetto in Italian, in Old Italian means a foundry, a metal foundry, and basically they put the Jews on a Superfund site, the
Yeah,
most polluted, disgusting, polluted part of Venice, which is an abandoned metal foundry. And I just picture, the way water starts looking rainbowy with those weird heavy metal,
right.
like things floating. That's what I picture that area looking like, you know. And therefore it was called the ghetto because it was on the site of the foundry. So the ghetto was opened in 1516.
Right?
So they wanted to do a 500th commemoration. And they said, Frank, what should we do? So I came up with a bunch of proposals, of which they did none. And they ended up doing a, a production of Shakespeare's Merchant of Venice because, as Dr. Shaul Bassi, who's the head of Beit Venezia and a Shakespearean scholar, says, who is the Venice ghetto's most famous Jew? Shylock.
Right.
Even though there is no Shylock and Shakespeare never visited uh, Venice in his
That's
life, the
right.
most famous Jew of the Venice ghetto is Shylock. So,
But
so
Shakespeare did write The Merchant of Venice very much based on the historical stories of the ghetto in Venice.
I didn't know that.
Yes.
So in any case, so they made we did I got invited. I wrote and performed the music We did Merchant of Venice in the Venice ghetto, in the square, and it was amazing.
Wow.
But one of the projects I had proposed was called Ghetto Songs. And I said, let's start by looking at the music from the Venice ghetto, 500 years ago in the ghetto. Let's expand that to look at music from other Jewish communities in Italy throughout the last 500 years. And let's even expand that to look at music from all ghettos in the world, Jewish, non-Jewish, all ghettos. And I'll
Wow.
make a program that ties them all together called Ghetto Songs. And we ended up doing that 3 years later in 2019. And we did live concerts in Germany and in Italy. And then in the middle of the pandemic in September, I got a call from my colleagues in Venice. And they said, listen, we just got some money. There's some grant money. This is September. And we want to do something, and it's got to be for, they do Holocaust Remembrance Day on January
27th.
7th. They don't do
Yes.
it on Yom HaShoah. They do it on January 27th. That's their holiday.
Right.
They said the only proviso is you have to spend the money by the end of the calendar year, 3 months, and we have to have a finished product in our hands by January 27th. Can we do it? I said, sure. I got nothing else to do. All my gigs have been canceled. What the fuck? I got nothing else to do. So we took the music that we had been played in the concerts. I unfortunately had to replace all the European musicians with musicians from New York, with the exception of the amazing cantor Svetlana Kundish, who I overdubbed from Berlin, but everyone else was in New York. This time, it was the wrong time of year. We couldn't do it outdoors in a garden. So we put on our masks, got COVID tested. Everyone was negative. We went into a studio with isolation booths and we recorded 12 songs, all either from or about different ghettos in the world, based around the Venice ghetto, but
Right.
stretching all the way into the Polish ghettos during the Holocaust, different Jewish ghettos like the Mela, which means salt, which is the Jewish ghetto in Marrakesh, and then to the ghettos like the African American ghettos in Harlem and Watts, to the townships where the black South Africans were forced to live. So, and we included all this, and that's Ghetto Songs.
Well, and there is a cantorial element to this.
Oh, so what
So-
song were we playing?
Which I love. So sit back and enjoy. We won't listen to the whole thing.
Okay, what song? Okay, here we go. Yeah.
Oh,
Oh, share song.
oh, there it is. Ah,
O Lord, thou knowest my inmost hopes and thoughts. Thou knowest whene'er I shed salt tears and uttered many a moan before thy judgment throne. 'Twas not for vanities that I besought. O turn on me thy look with mercy fraught, and see how envious malice makes me grow.
It's just so beautiful. I honestly,
Thank you.
it's just, I would play the rest, but we don't have
Well,
time.
that's okay. People can buy the album. It's actually, we're releasing it for at the same time as the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising commemoration. So
Wow, which
saving
is
this month,
April 29th?
20, something like that, yeah.
Yeah, I think it's
So
April
it'll
29th.
be available starting in late April.
In Warsaw Ghetto is Jetzt Chodesh Nissen, one of the greatest, most magnificent poems of resistance of all time. Frank, first of all, I love you, man.
Love
You're
you,
amazing.
Avi. What a lovely hour schmoozing. I mean, we could have done this for three and without even breaking.
Oh, easily. We could go on, and you know what? I accept the idea that you and I can do another one of these when the time is right. Maybe when life comes back to normal a little bit more, and we can start doing live shows again.
Oh,
I
we
can't
will do it.
wait.
We will do it. We're gonna have fun. I mean,
I cannot wait.
we're gonna put the
Excellent.
whole Miami thing together, and it's gonna,
So, where can people buy this new album?
you know, I mean, in about a week or 10 days, all the normal online channels, Amazon, Bandcamp,
Great,
all
great,
that kind of
great,
stuff.
great.
What is
Beautiful.
fun? Okay.
Frank, thank
The next
you.
time we schmooze, I want to save some time for me to like interview you and ask you about all your upcoming projects because definitely no moss grows on Avi Hoffman, that's for sure.
I cannot not do stuff.
I know.
I have to keep on going. And I consider, more and more as I get older and I see how important what we're doing is and how it affects people so deeply. I mean, people literally write me emails sometimes to say that, I've brought them back to a place of family, a place of Hamishkeit, the Hamish feeling, the Mishpuche. These are feelings that some people haven't felt in decades. And so I think more and more of myself as a cultural activist than I do as an actor or a singer or a
It's funny.
performer.
We don't plan these things, and yet that's what happens, and that's what happened. And you know what?
Right?
That's what happened. There's nothing.
Listen, I have so many things coming. Our no turning back that you did for
Yeah,
us. I am now preparing to bring it to all the major broadcast networks and say, hey guys, this is so good, you have to show it. And whether it ends up being on PBS or Netflix or HBO, that concert will have a life. I have also optioned the film version of Death of a Salesman in Yiddish. And I have an offer out to a major A-list director that I can't talk about. But if it comes through, we're talking about a medium budget indie feature film.
allow me to throw my hat into the ring to be considered for composer.
Halavai, halavai, halavai.
I love scoring films, and it would be so nice to, to find. Actually, it would be such a challenge to find. I'm sorry. You know that all those great Hollywood composers of the 40s and 50s, especially, were
Sure,
all mostly classically trained Jewish refugees.
of
And
course.
all including Randy Newman's uncle,
Wow.
Alfred Newman, um, just all of them. And you think about. In fact, I'm trying to think of like, well, like 12 Angry Men. The scores. We can all hear the scores for, and I just love the idea of doing a score that's sort of like one of those classic theater dark scores, and yet just like you're doing it in Yiddish, how do you put just a little touch? This for me is where it gets fun. How do you just slightly insinuate some Jewish klezmer thing without just getting totally obvious and
Right, right, right.
you
Yeah.
know how do you really, and that for me is such a beautiful challenge. I
Well,
live for
if
that.
you remember when we did the show in New York and in Toronto, we had a wonderful composer who wrote some very abstract kind of,
Oh, I remember that. Who did that? Do you remember?
ugh, you had to ask me that
Okay,
question
okay,
right
sorry.
now, out of context.
Okay, I will find it while, okay, don't worry about it. We will post it online because that's how
Yes,
we are. I can't
but
remember names of anybody for anything.
But Frank, I love you much. I
Oh,
thank you for joining me in the
oh,
schmooze. We could go on forever, but I have to thank my sponsors. So I'm going to say goodbye, but not for long. I think it won't be long before we are back on the boards, and I can't wait to do projects with you again, with Eleanor, bring you guys back down to Florida. I think bagels and bongos on Calle Ocho and at the Betsy
oh
Hotel.
my, come on. Isn't that the most fun thing that you can imagine?
I could not imagine having more fun.
And we'll just get the whole band right down there. It's going to be too good. All right, you are the man.
Thank
You are
you.
the man. This has been too good. I'm trying to, uh, Ellen Mandel.
Ellen Mandel, yes, thank you. Ellen Mandel.
Thank you, Internet.
Yep, thank you, thank you,
Thank you,
thank you.
Internet.
So I'm going to ask you to turn off your video and I will share my last thoughts with everyone and tell them the other stuff that's coming up. So
All right,
thank you,
love you all.
Frank.
Be well. Bye.
Thanks, man. We have a lot of things coming up. Go to our website, Why I Love Jewish, Yiddishkeit Initiative, Why I Love Jewish. And there, if you sign up and join our mailing list, you will get all the information about all of the things we're doing coming up. We have some events in May, in June, and then eventually we're going to have another festival at the end of August and early September. We have Yiddish classes, we have merchandise, we have so many wonderful programs on our YouTube channel. Subscribe. We have over 100 programs. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter and on Instagram. Ladies and gentlemen, I thank you so much. Live from the Betsy Hotel. I thank you all for joining us, and we'll see you next week at Schmoozing with Avi. Thanks. Ah, oh, we're going here.